Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Map Talk webinar on diversity, equity, and inclusion. My name is George Hammond. I'm director of the Economic and Business Research Center here at the University of Arizona. I'm joined this morning by Jennifer Pullen, senior research economist and Map Dashboard coordinator. And we're both very happy to welcome three special guest panelists to the webinar today. Jenny Flynn is the president and CEO of the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona. Felipe Garcia is the president and CEO of Visit Tucson. And Lisa Lavallo is market vice president for Southern Arizona for Cox Communications. So next slide, please. So the meeting details, as you may remember, if you've attended one of our Map Talks in the past, the Map Talk will be recorded and we will post the recording in the next day or so after the event. This is a webinar, and that means that it's going to be conducted in conference mode, which in turn means that everyone will be muted except for the presenters and panelists. If you'd like to ask a question, we would love that. You can enter your question into the Q&A function of Zoom. That's at the bottom of your Zoom controls. Or you can email me anytime during the webinar or even after at ghammond@arizona.edu. So next slide, please. Now I want to recognize the MAP partners and sustaining sponsors. Our partners are the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, the Pima Association of Governments, the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, Sun Corridor Incorporated, and of course, the University of Arizona. Our sustaining sponsors are Tucson Electric Power, the Thomas R. Brown Family Foundation, and the Freeport-McMoran Foundation. Without the support of our partners and sponsors, the Map Dashboard wouldn't exist and we wouldn't be here today. I also want to draw your attention to the monthly Map Dashboard features that you can find in the Arizona Daily Star. You'll find a Map Business feature in the business section on the last Sunday of each month. It's easy to find. It's on the front page of the business section. And then on the first Monday of the month in the health section, you'll find a Map Dashboard feature on health. So be sure and check out the Map Dashboard features on the Arizona Daily Star. And with that, I will turn the webinar over to Jennifer Pullen.
Thank you, George. It's wonderful to be here with everyone today. I'm going to spend a few minutes highlighting data from recent articles that we've published on the Map Dashboard, and I hope this helps set the stage for the discussion we'll have with our guest speakers shortly. So recently, we published 3 different articles on the Map Dashboard on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the first one here, so there we go. The first one explored the changing demographic mix in Tucson, and the second article examined how equitable Tucson's economy is from a workforce perspective, and the third article highlighted how connected our region is. So I'm going to discuss some of the information found in these articles for Tucson and the state of Arizona, but there's a ton of information in these articles, and I encourage you to go and visit the Map Dashboard and read these articles if you haven't already. We have data not just on Tucson and Arizona, but we have information for the U.S., for all 10 Western states, and for Tucson's pure metropolitan areas, so those 11 other metropolitan areas that we track on the map. So if you're interested in how Tucson compares in any of these areas that we discussed today, how they compare to Portland, Oregon, or how they compare to Austin, Texas, or to Albuquerque, New Mexico, you can go and you can look at all of that more detailed data within the articles. So it's important for us to track diversity and changing demographics to help identify challenges that may exist in our region. Diversity makes our lives richer, and when inclusion matters and diverse groups are brought to the table, it helps to drive new ideas and creativity both in our workplace and within our community. So the Census Bureau put together data from 2020 that shows that the US is more racially and ethnically diverse than it was a decade ago. So they created this diversity index, and this measures the probability that 2 people chosen at random will be from a different race and race and ethnic group. So of the Western states measured here, you can see that on the Western, so these are the 10 Western states that we look at on the map. And of those states, Arizona had the 5th highest diversity index at 61.5%. And that means there's a 61.5% chance that 2 people chosen at random would be from a different racial or ethnic group. California had the highest at 69.7%, and Idaho the lowest diversity index at 35.9%. Unfortunately, for this particular indicator, the census doesn't release data for Tucson, but we do have a slightly different measure from the National Equity Atlas that does look at data for Tucson. And it's a slightly different measure. It's based on 6 major race and ethnic groups. And what a maximum score here of 1.75 would tell us is that each group was represented evenly within your region. And so the measures tracked over time, so we can see if a region is becoming more or less diverse. And so I think our key takeaways from this particular graph is that Tucson's there in the orange line, is that Tucson is less diverse than either the US, which is that green line, or the state of Arizona, which is that blue line. So Tucson's slightly less diverse than the nation or the state, but we have seen since 1980, this data started in 1980, over the last 40 years, we have seen diversity increasing significantly nationally, statewide, and in Tucson. And so all of these geographies that are listed below this graph in gray, our data is available for them. These are the ones that I'm talking about. You can go and visit the article, click on these geographies, and compare Tucson to any of these states or metropolitan areas that you're interested in. Also, if you see this little hamburger menu up in the upper right of the graph, you can download this data. All of the data that we have available on the map is downloadable. Go here, click on the geographies you're interested in, click on that little hamburger menu, download the data as an Excel file, a CSV, or you can save all of our images as JPEGs or vector images, and we encourage you to use them in your own presentations, your own work, and to download any information that we have available on the map dashboard. So we can look at how population has changed. So we know that Tucson's becoming more diverse, and this next graph helps to illustrate which race and ethnicities have changed, how they have changed over the last 10 years. So you can see the mixed other population grew by 27% between 2010 and 2019. The Asian Pacific Islander population had the 2nd fastest growth rate at 16%, followed by the Latino population at 13%. And the white non-Hispanic population actually saw a decline during those 10 years between 2010 and 2019 of 2%. And this is for the Tucson metropolitan area specifically. We can also explore how the demographic mix in Tucson varies by age group. And you can see here from the graph that it is vastly different depending on which age group you're looking at. So the blue bars are representing the 65 and older group. And you can see that in Tucson in 2019, the 65 and older age group was predominantly white. Almost 80% of the population that was 65 and older was white. And then you can look at the green bar, the 25 to 64, and the 18 to 24 population, and it becomes much more diverse, particularly when you look at those orange bars, 18 to 24 age group. There is a increasing diversity, another way that we can show the increase in diversity that has occurred in Tucson over the last couple of decades. So the population is expected to continue to become more diverse over the next couple of decades. It's vital that we track how our community is changing in order to remove barriers that may exist and create policies that allow all members of our community to access economic and educational opportunities. This is why we write feature articles on the map dashboard and include different kinds of data analysis and disaggregations like this. So now we're going to switch gears and we're going to explore how equitable Tucson is from the workforce perspective. So this would be the 2nd article that we recently published on the map. And so one way to measure if an economy or region is equitable is to explore trends in the workforce. So does everyone who wants to work have a job, have a good job? And that's a question that is asked often with how equitable is your workforce or your region? So the labor force participation rate here is shown for the working age population. That is that age group 25 to 64. And we've broken it down by race and ethnicity. And again, this is for 2019. A lot of the data that I'm talking about today is 2019 or 2020. So this 2019 is kind of pre-pandemic, what was going on. We had a pretty strong economy at that time. And so we can see here 2019, a little bit of variation, 81%, the mixed other population had the highest labor force participation rate in 2019 at 81%. The Native American population had the lowest at 71%. A little bit of variation among the other race and ethnicities. Black population here, 76%, Latino population, 78%, the white non-Hispanic population, 75%. Another way that we can explore an equitable workforce is by examining the unemployment rate by race and ethnicity. In Tucson, the unemployment rate prior to the pandemic in 2019 was the highest for the Native American population. That's evident by the graph here, substantially higher, almost double any of the other race or ethnicities at 15%. We see Black, Latino, and mixed other populations right around the same 6 to 8% unemployment rate. Asian or Pacific Islanders with the lowest unemployment rate. And so it's normal to have some level of unemployment. You have that natural unemployment rate around 3-4%. That's as people switch jobs, exit and enter the labor market for various reasons. That 3 to 4% is a really kind of normal unemployment rate, but excuse me, the unemployment rate is clearly a measure of the percent of the population who want to work there. This is the percent of the population by race and ethnicity who is actively seeking a job. And then we can also explore wage differences by level of education for different race and ethnicities as a measure of equality. So as you can tell from this graph, it's clear there's significant variation exists at all levels of education. And so we're going to focus just on these two first sections here, bachelor's degree or better or high school. And so we'll start with this high school, and you can see the orange bar, that's the Asian or Pacific Islander, the green bar is the Black population, the dark blue bar is the Latino population. That is, this right here is the mean hourly wage. All three of these are $15 an hour, and you can compare them to the white non-Hispanic population, which is $19 an hour in 2019. So that was the mean hourly wage. That $4 difference doesn't seem like a lot when you look at it on an hourly basis, but when you start to calculate that for somebody who's working 40 hours a week, every week of the year, 2,080 hours a year, that equals about a $9,000 difference. And so we're talking that's a huge difference for individuals in lower income brackets. So you're looking at basically 31,000. These individuals earning $15 an hour, working 40 hours a week, every week of the year, earning about $31,000 a year, versus someone who's earning $19 an hour, working every 40 hours a week, every week of the year, is earning almost $40,000. So that's pretty substantial difference in the lower income brackets. And then it becomes even more substantial for those with a bachelor's degree or better. And you can see here that orange bar, Asian or Pacific Islander population, that mean hourly wage of $39 compared to the Native American population, Latino and Black populations, $24, $25, $26 an hour for those with a bachelor's degree or better. And that works out to be about a $30,000 a year difference. So fairly substantial differences here when we look at the mean hourly wage by race and ethnicity for similar levels of education in 2019. So somewhere else that we see significant variation is the percent of the population in poverty, and that's not surprising when we look at the wage data and the unemployment data. So you can see here that we have trend data 1980 through 2019 for our different races and ethnicities reported by the National Equity Atlas. And so we can see here the Native American population, the highest poverty rate at 37%, followed by the Black population at 27%. And fairly consistent over time. We did see an uptick with the Black population currently having the highest poverty rate they have in over 40 years here at 27%. Native American population, their poverty rate has declined slightly from a high in the 1990s. And so high levels of poverty and low wages are often associated with low homeownership rates. In 2019, homeownership rates were highest among the white population and lowest among the Black population. You can see more than a 30 percentage point difference here. Black population at 36% homeownership rate, the white non-Hispanic population is 69% homeownership rate. This is important because homeownership is one way that people can build assets and wealth over time. And disparities in homeownership across race and ethnicities can partly be explained by differences in income levels, but not completely by income levels. There's something called the wealth gap that exists between white households and households of color, and that plays a really important role and what's going on. And this wealth gap exists even when we account for differences in age, income, and level of education. A lot of this has to do with wealth that is passed down from generations. And this is important because wealth and asset accumulation is a safety net that helps buffer temporary setbacks and loss of income. And as you can tell from this one measure here, home ownership rates, that many households of color do not have this safety net. And then I'm going to wrap up the data analysis section here with our youth. And so this is our young people, our future workforce, and we'll talk about what percentage of them are disconnected. And that means what percentage of our 16 to 24-year-olds in our community in Tucson are not going to school, do not have a job, or not in a trade program. And you can see from our graph that the Native American population has the highest percentage of youth disconnected at 38%, followed kind of here by the Black, Latino, and mixed other populations at 14 to 15%. And so it's really important that all young people have access to jobs and educational opportunities. Data has shown that these disconnected youth can experience long-lasting impacts that include lower earnings, poor health, higher unemployment rates over time. So it's important that we really, focus on our youth and reduce the disconnected youth numbers. And so I hope that this data and information that I've highlighted is going to help guide our conversation today. I'm really excited to have all three of our speakers. They all care about our community, they care about diversity, equity, inclusion within their organizations and within our community. So I'm going to stop our screen share now, and I'm going to ask our three guest speakers to turn on their cameras and unmute themselves. And we're just going to have a conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we'll, feel free, all three of you, to jump in, but I'll start out with Jenny Flynn. The data suggests that people of color struggle in many areas within our region. They have higher unemployment rates, higher poverty rates, lower homeownership rates, a large percentage of disconnected youth. So as a leader in our community, what do you see as our biggest challenge?
Well, thanks, Jennifer and George and my fellow panelists. I'm really excited to be having this conversation. It's a really important one, and I think really important to have it grounded in the data that you presented, Jennifer. So thank you. So before I kind of launch in and address your question, let me just do a little more introduction of the organization that I represent. So the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona is a national standards accredited community foundation. It was founded in 1980. And in those years, it was some community philanthropists who pulled together and had the goal of helping to meet the needs of our community as the needs of our community change. So we're here, we say part of our purpose is that we're here now and forever, and we're here as a resource for the community. And our purpose in its entirety is to create an equitable and vibrant community for all Southern Arizonans by connecting donors to the causes they care about now and forever. So if you kind of break that down, you can see how important it is that we track these changes in the community that you've been talking about. All Southern Arizonans means all Southern Arizonans. That's our aspiration. We certainly do not perfectly reach it, but that is our aspiration. So, and I personally joined the Community Foundation for Southern Arizona, which I'll probably slip into calling CFSA because that's what we call it internally because it's a long name, 15 months ago. So I came to Tucson in 1999. So I've lived in this community a really long time. And I've raised my family here and, spent a long time at the university and elsewhere. But joined relatively recently into the CEO role here at the Community Foundation. So with that context, if I kind of think about what's our biggest issue, there's a lot of biggest issues. I'm going to answer it in two ways. One is what's the hottest issue? And that is, from my perspective, looking at the nonprofit community and where we see needs in the community, it's housing. 100% housing. What we see is, some changes that have occurred in the affordability of housing and, COVID impacts, I think, and other impacts on the economy have resulted in people who are already feeling stretched at all sort of income levels and all racial ethnic groups but particularly people of color, where due to some of those, that housing wealth gap that you talked about, Jennifer, are really experiencing a lot of challenges. So that's probably the biggest one. But if I go sort of underneath, like what's even deeper, and there are other layers you could go, but the deeper layer I'd say is around inequity, right? So you just laid out a tremendous wealth of data that shows how, depending on your age and your race and ethnicity, you're going to experience your opportunities, your chances for wealth, your wages, all kinds of things differently. So if we're going to have a vibrant, equitable community, which is for all Southern Arizonans, which is the purpose of our organization, then it's really important that we continue to address that inequity. And my way of doing that through this organization is through philanthropy and through engaging individuals, families, corporations, foundations, organizations that want to join hands together in order to address some of the challenges that we face in this community together.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you, Jenny. And I agree. We write a lot about housing. We've done a lot of work on housing affordability. And if you haven't visited the MAP dashboard, check that out. We have housing cost burden, housing affordability, and information is definitely a current challenge for our community. I'd like to welcome Lisa now and ask you maybe to speak a little bit about your organization, give us a little more detailed introduction of yourself, and then talk about what you feel are the biggest challenges currently in the community.
Okay, well, thank you, Jennifer and George also, and Eller, for keeping the MAP dashboard alive and relevant in our community. It's such a helpful tool in so many ways. So it's great to be here to support this. My name is Lisa Lavallo. I am the Vice President here for Cox Communications. So my responsibilities are to basically handle our business and political government issues in Pima and Cochise counties. Santa Cruz County too, we have a little bit of business there. We have about 500 employees that operate locally and about 450,000 customers. So it's a big business. Obviously, with what has happened with COVID, you can understand how broadband has become really an integral service, a critical service to create equity throughout communities all over the world. And Tucson's no different, and Southern Arizona no different. So I've been with Cox for 15 years. I'm a U of A grad and an Eller MBA, so I'm happy to be part of this program as an alum. And I would say, as far as things that are affecting our community, I think, definitely poverty has been on our backs for a very, very long time. And some of the data that Jennifer shared, I think really brings that into fine focus. And so from a business perspective, we have for many years tried to bridge that digital divide, to try to provide products and services at an affordable level so that families and businesses and startups all have an opportunity to access customers, education, and other experiences wherever they need to and from wherever they want to. And that's no easy task because broadband networks are expensive to build and maintain. There's a very heavy regulatory climate around our business, and so that also makes it challenging to go fast. But certainly with the recent federal legislation, infrastructure, BEAD funds, the Corporation Commission, the Arizona Commerce Authority, all the federal dollars that are coming into broadband expansion is helping us accelerate our ability to get to households in need or households that are underserved on broadband. So that's really our top priority. We see that as a huge equity issue to make sure that everybody has the ability not only to access a broadband connection that is reliable, but to have the education necessary to use the tools that connect to the internet so that you can be effective wherever you are, because not everyone has the same level of literacy around the digital economy, as you can see from the demographics on education. So that's got to be part of our effort also. As a company, I'll tell you that DE&I isn't just a buzz phrase to us. We've been working on this for several decades. We are a privately held family-owned business, and the owners of our company are very committed to DE&I. And when I say that, I mean, diversity is kind of table stakes, right? I mean, diversity already exists. So it's really about, can you create an inclusive environment in your business that makes sure that everyone feels safe, seen, and heard. And with that, then move towards equity within the organization before you turn external to look at how we can make our community more equitable. So I'll just pause there, but we put a lot of resources into our DE&I efforts. We have staffed an entire department that focuses on this. We measure and have accountabilities for hiring pools and to make sure that we are bringing in as much diverse talent as we can and holding leaders accountable to creating inclusive environments that are safe as part of how we manage our business day to day.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, we definitely saw, you talk about getting broadband into underserved communities. We definitely saw that as an issue during COVID and the remote learning. And we wrote some articles and looked at kind of where those discrepancies were, like who was having challenges getting internet and broadband and actually with remote learning. And that's great that your organization is working on in expanding broadband to everyone. And now I'd like to welcome Felipe, and I would hope you can tell us a little bit about what you guys do at Visit Tucson, and then talk about what you see as, from your perspective, as one of the biggest challenges in our community.
So thank you again also for the invitation to have a dialogue and to talk to Lisa, to Jenny, and to you, Jennifer, about a very interesting topic that I think that we have challenges but great opportunities in our community. So again, I'm Felipe Garcia. I'm with Visit Tucson. We're the tourism office for Tucson and Southern Arizona. Our goal is to have people with money in their pockets to come and enjoy a great community. And then sometimes they leave, or sometimes they decide to make these their home later on. But it's about creating wealth and economic development through visitors coming here to Tucson. So we go market, advertise, promote our community throughout the world, literally, in the United States, in Mexico, in Europe, and Canada. Now, specific to the topic of DEI, and I think something that I feel very passionate about is that I think that we as a community, and I think as a country in general, we're afraid of talking about DEI because it's a very hard subject to discuss. We're all afraid. I mean, when I got the invitation, Jennifer and George, to participate in this panel, one of my purposes, I said, okay, I hopefully can influence one individual to start making some commitments or action in DEI in our community. But second, I want to avoid being in national news about the person that said something horrible in a Zoom meeting. So he's like, gosh, how can we be very, very careful? And I go back to a very interesting story of this girl here in Tucson that I was talking to her. She was at the time 14 years old. She's white, and one of her best friends is Black. And they had a great relationship. It was a bunch of girls, and I saw them interact, and it was great to see that great partnership, friendship between them. She took a class on DEI, and she came to me and told me later on that now she was very afraid on how to interact with one of her best friends, because she was told that it was not okay to do many things that she was doing, maybe naively, maybe with no misconceptions. So unfortunately, she has seen her relationship completely changed after that class on DEI, because there were many stigmas put in her head, maybe. So when I see, again, when we talk about DEI in this panel, or when I talk to our individuals, I know that we're afraid and we're concerned about expressing our thoughts because we don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to be something that is perceived wrong. So unfortunately, I think that many times our efforts in our community, many communities, are how do we do DEI as a symbolism and not as something that is really a change in our community, in our organization. So we're more worried about, is a picture of my board of directors, is a picture of my staff, is the image diverse, and I have someone that I can put check marks on all of those graphics that you were showing, and not really looking to the substance. So I think that the challenge we face in our communities is that we have a big gap on equity issues, in diversity issues, but I don't think that we are comfortable still as a community into how to really talk about this. And let's start making change. I'm very proud of the community that we live, how diverse it is, how when I see visitors coming here and they tell me, Felipe, this is such a cool place, I feel welcome here. I had an elected official from the Maricopa County region, I will not name him, and I bump into him and his family here downtown at Mercado San Agustin. And I said, hey, great to see you. What are you doing here? And he told me, Felipe, I love coming to Tucson because I feel that I belong. I feel that I'm part of a community. And this person is from the metro area of Phoenix, and still he says, I don't feel comfortable there, and Tucson is a place that I do. So I think the biggest challenge we have is let's start talking seriously about the substance of DEI, and that is going to help us make, I think, better decisions in how can we level those numbers into that you were presenting, Jennifer, in the graphics a few minutes ago.
Right. Thank you so much, Felipe. I agree. When I was putting my remarks together for the talk, I sometimes think about how to carefully say things so that I don't offend it. It is something I think that we're all conscious of, and maybe should try to be better, just have open conversations with individuals, could maybe move towards progressing things more quickly. So I would like to now ask each of you how, DEI is obviously important to all of your organizations and within our community. And so how you kind of approach this as a continuous process with your hiring and within your community, how you organize, to further the DEI efforts within your organizations over the years. And Elisa, if you'd like to start.
Sure. So it's interesting that you should ask, because it's been kind of a journey both for the company, and then as an individual, you have to also, to Felipe's point, ask yourself and look at yourself and say, am I really contributing to making things better, not only as a leader, but as a community partner? And so, Cox has been going down this path for some time. And I would say that when the summer of George Floyd happened, that's when we really started getting serious about measurement and about moving, compensation towards actually walking the talk and making sure that executives and leaders are being held accountable to creating opportunity for all. And when you look at the data, and we looked at our data, we said we're not doing well enough. We indexed ourselves versus other companies like us in our industry and outside of our industry. And in some areas we were doing well. In other areas, in particular, African Americans in leadership, we were not doing well. And so we found through our own internal assessment, our self-assessment, that we have some work to do. And then we also decided at that time that we needed to hear more from what our employees had to say about this topic. To Felipe's point, people need to get comfortable talking about this before they're going to get comfortable acting differently or acting more openly and inclusively. And so we had really a year of dialogues. We had a year-long dialogue of all over the country. It was a great thing that we had Teams and Zoom and stuff then. It allowed us to connect a lot of people to this topic. And it was really, really interesting to hear about the pain that a lot of our African-American colleagues were feeling and suffering through that summer, and who'd been suffering for a long time. It's just that white America or corporate America didn't really understand what it's like to see that on television over and over and over again. So I mean, for me, I had an epiphany at that same time and started to assess, what am I doing in the community to really make a difference? Am I walking the talk or just talking? Am I a talking head, or am I actually getting my sleeves rolled up and doing something? So as part of that, we reached out to the University of Arizona, to their diversity, and actually to the College of Social and Behavioral Science at the time, to have them conduct some research for our company on how individuals and organizations and customers and people who are in the field of diversity and equity view our company, to get a real look at, from a local, hyper-local perspective, how are we perceived? What are the things that are the real local needs? Because that's something that really came out of this learning, was that all diversity, inclusion, and equity issues are local. That's why the MAP dashboard data is so important, that we can get some granularity about what's happening here, because it's different in San Francisco, it's different in Oakland, it's different in Chicago, it's different in Phoenix. And so really, what are the needs of this community? So we spent 6 months doing interviews, or they did interviews and gathered a lot of data. And then around that, we built a local plan to start putting our money, our time, our resources, our people against organizations that were going to move the needle on social justice issues. So it's been an evolution of several years to get to a point of being able to say, in the areas of equity, these are where we're trying to make influence. This is where we're trying to make impact, teaching and educating our employees about what's happening in the community at a local level and how they can act to be more just. And one thing that a professor at the university said really early on to me that stuck was that if you don't have your own house in order, don't spend any time trying to make the community equitable. If you haven't done the self-assessment of your own organization to say, where are we deficient? Where are we strong? What are we doing to put policies and practices in place to make our own house inclusive and diverse, don't waste your time going to the community because no one's going to believe you. If your own employees don't feel like you're running an operation like that, don't expect that the community is going to believe you either. So, you know, I think that I would say is the important starting point for any organization is the self-assessment.
Oh, that's a really good point. Thank you, Lisa. Felipe, would you like to talk a little bit about the continuous process?
And I agree with Lisa that it's a process, it never ends. I don't see something that I said, oh, here's my goal, and December of 2027, I'm done. I think it's something that we keep moving, we keep evolving, it's constant, but it's beautiful because it helps create. I sense that the moment that we start paying more attention to DEI issues inside of the organization, the better work environment we have and the better corporate culture that we can have. And I think that for us, at least internally, has been some training, education, but a lot of dialogue and conversations. And sometimes it's not in a formal way. Sometimes it's very, very informal. It's very casual. It's setting up an environment where people can get together on a hallway, on the break room or whatever, and talk about issues that maybe are a little bit, again, that we're afraid to talk or discuss, and have that open and transparent conversation. I think for me, it's just phenomenal. I don't see something that I don't have a goal that by this date I'm going to be done. I think it's going to be constantly changing, constantly evolving, but it's definitely a great asset for our organization.
Right. Yeah, I would like to follow up with Jenny a little bit on something you said, and is that how you're, how it's a continuous process for CFSA with DEI, but also do you do anything internally to help support your current employees to create more inclusivity within the organization?
Yeah, sure. When you pull back the curtain for the audience, we got the questions in advance. So when I got that question, these questions, I wrote pages and pages of notes, because it kind of building on what Lisa and Felipe had to say. There's no beginning and there's no end really to this work, because, again, I keep going back to, we meet the needs of the community as the needs of the community change, right? So that, it's a living thing and it's always going to keep changing. So I'll try not to say too many things, but, if I kind of go back, and again, I've only been here 15 months. So some of my initial work in this has been to understand the history and where people started. And I think in order to have authentic conversations around DEI, and we actually use IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. And we add access to how we talk about it internally and the work that we do. But to have those authentic conversations, I think it's just really important to have psychological safety, so that you can have a conversation that, we have internally something called the IDEA Committee, which is a committee of our board and our staff that has an ongoing set of meetings and dialogues and informational sessions. When I arrived, there's a long history of IDEA work at the Community Foundation, as you can imagine, right? We're made up of the communities that are here in Southern Arizona. In 1999, the LGBTQ plus Alliance Fund was founded. In 2013, the African American Legacy Fund was founded by Dr. Anna Jo Olivet, who was our board chair at the time. And so we've had really significant history in kind of uplifting communities that sought out the opportunity to join together philanthropically to work on raising up their own communities with the support of the Community Foundation. When I arrived, it was just shortly past, I don't know what we call, in 20 years, we'll know what we'll call the post-George Floyd time. We'll know what we were going to call this COVID time. I don't know what to call it, but, I kind of came in right after all of that had been extremely high tension and was a little bit settling down. And, our board and staff had done a lot of really good work. Going back to 2016, we established IDEA as one of our values. We had, the YWCA came and helped and kind of coached us as a group. We have had all, sort of numerous trainings and work, established our IDEA statement and so on, but kind of to the point that we're talking about, I think it was a little more in the words than the deeds. And then in the middle of all of that community tension, I think there was a bit of a misfire, and a consultant came in to work with the team. Again, this is before I started, so I didn't witness it, but I did witness the lack of psychological safety that had developed as a consequence, and trust had not been earned. I'm not talking, it's not the YWCA, they were great. It was someone else, a national person. And the outcome of it was that there was a lot of raw emotion and people kind of to the point that you made, Felipe, about the young girl who just wasn't sure how to talk anymore, and that community needed some healing. So we did, we continue to do a lot of that work, and I think that kind of continuous process of having this joint board and staff, and for those of you not in nonprofit, staff tends to be younger, although we're working on our age diversity on our board, but that tends to be, people who are later on in their lives often have more time to volunteer. So often the staff are a little more pushing forward because they're of the younger generation, and the board is maybe less so in a typical scenario. So we really needed to bring these groups together, so that ongoing idea committee it is really helping us, and we've joined that up with our strategic plan. So we're going through a strategic planning process. We've engaged Belen Gonzalez out of she's from Phoenix, but she's done a lot of work with foundations and in Southern Arizona. And really, we're going to do kind of a renewed assessment and our strategic planning work and our idea goals simultaneously. And in my mind, when I look at our goals, I see 10 years out, what would be that scary, crazy, wonderful planet that we'd all be living on, and then how do we get there? And I, like Felipe said, I don't see in 10 years somehow inequity will be gone. I mean, I wish, but it's not. So it's an ever-ending goal, but what progress can we make? How can we make that progress? What can we bite off that we can actually make progress on? What is our community internally ready to do? I was able to do a few quick wins because the community was ready. We hired a compensation consultant immediately. Nonprofit workers have been underpaid, underappreciated forever, so just trying to go through that process of making sure that we're even compensating people fairly, and it's just been the industry. It's nothing particular to this organization. So those are some of the ways that we've been working toward it. And I do want to just wrap up with one final thing, and you'll appreciate this, Jennifer. We did a data walk in our recent retreat. We used map data and we put it all around the room and had our board and staff kind of walk through. So a lot of the data that you presented early on was actually the data that we used in our data walk. And then that, opened great conversations, like, the Latino population of, I think, was 37%. And we don't have a Latino fund, and there's a lot of reasons why we don't, but that's the kind of thing where you're like, there's some areas for us to lean into and work on.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I love the data walk, using the map data to help further the community. So I'd like to maybe switch gears just a tiny bit and talk about how maybe what you've seen in your organization, how a diverse organization has benefited your community. And there's a lot of research that shows that it helps drive creativity and new ideas. So maybe some examples from each of your organizations on how, you think that diversity it benefited your organization. And maybe Lisa, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I can think of a couple specific things. One is, gender and ethnic diversity, right? I mean, that we've been dealing with that for many, many, many years. I was at P&G in the 80s, and we were doing DE&I training way back then. So, and that was more about women coming into the workforce. So that's continually evolving. I mean, when you work in Southern Arizona and you have a large Latino population, and you want to connect to the Latino customer base and to Latino elected officials and leaders, I mean, it certainly helps having people who have had a Latino life experience to be able to talk and relate. And for being bilingual in Southern Arizona is incredibly helpful, and having employees and leaders who can meet people where they are based on their background has been really helpful. And it's wonderful too. I mean, and they bring a whole, the different ethnic backgrounds. We celebrate that through different kinds of employee get-togethers, and just to be able to share your cultural awareness. I mean, I'm Italian. Everybody knows Italian food, but not everybody knows Thai food. And so when we bring together employees, and we had the richness of all that before COVID, it was really educational. So I think it helps with employee engagement. It helps with employee retention. It certainly helps with relationships throughout the community. And, it goes without saying that if you are trying to market and sell your products to the Latino population, and you have a bunch of gringos sitting in a room, you're probably going to miss out on some of the important elements to creating a great marketing campaign to connect with a certain population or ethnic group. So I think that's been going on in business a long time. I think what's emerging is even more important, and especially now since you have access to workers from all over the world through Teams and other things, is this diversity of experience, diversity of background, not just ethnicity and gender, but life experiences. You know, that you're tapping into people who have lived in all different places, people who have worked for all different organizations. It's not just the same, you know, people working in the same company for 40 years. And if you're able to tap into not only the generational differences, you know, as Jenny was alluding to, but to, again, you know, if you bring a young leader over who worked for, you know, consumer products into cable, that's a whole different mentality in terms of how they look at competition, how they think about customers, how they think about the customer experience. And so being able to bring them into the room and around the table and really listen and make sure that they're heard, right? Creating that inclusive environment in which no idea is truly a bad idea. A lot of people say that, but then it just kind of, you know, they get head patted. So I think that's a huge opportunity as we have access now to people from all over the country and the world to be part of our teams.
Thank you, Lisa. Felipe, would you like to talk a little bit about how you know, your workforce has benefited from being diverse?
I think that absolutely, and it helps in the sense that, again, as Lisa mentioned, it just those conversations and open you the eyes to different cultures, different age groups, different. I mean, it's when you set up an environment, you have those conversations. I think is beneficial, and when everyone embraces it. For example, what was it, 2-3 years ago? I decided to have an altar for Day of the Dead for the office. When you go to Mexico, and once I was visiting a manufacturing supplier for Ford Motor Company. This is like, again, people working with robots and welding things, and they had an altar in the kitchen. And you went to different places and they have altars to Day of the Dead. So it said, let's do one for staff. Let's do one here internally. And it was a great way for staff to first ask, why are you doing this? And what's the purpose? And once you explain to them and you say, well, it's to be honoring someone that has been passed away from your family. And then they bring those pictures to our altar, and they start talking about their parents or a family member, their friend. And you start building connections in a different way that is not just the transactional business day to day, it's personal. They'll talk to you about my dad and how I miss my dad, or my friend that passed away, and that's the things that they like. So it opens an engagement and conversations in different ways. So I'm very happy to see that we have at VC Tucson, we've been recruiting more and more a diverse workforce. But what I appreciate the most is that we can have very open conversations and dialogue, not only related to professional activities, but also more personal matters that can help us understand more about the diversity of our community. And that helps us when we're doing our job of marketing Tucson and telling the Tucson story to the world, that we understand our community, we understand the world.
Right, that's very important. Thank you, Felipe. Jenny, would you like to talk a little bit about how the diverse workforce has benefited your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many ways, but I'll focus on two. So one is, you know, I don't know about all of you, but it's been a tight labor market recently. So, you know, I feel like just from a business standpoint, it's really important that you attract all of the talent with all of the different backgrounds that you possibly can. And, you know, particularly, you know, I don't mean to call out our younger employees, but they're such a great benefit to us because they really hold us accountable. And so I need to create an organization where all generations of our employees will want to work and feel included. And so for me, just having a diverse workforce is an absolute sort of business and talent requirement, right? So that's one. And we benefit from people bringing those skills from and backgrounds where they can be effective in working with the very diverse populations of donors and grantees that we work with across Southern Arizona, including everything south of the Gila River. So we also have, we work in Santa Cruz County and elsewhere. So that's one. And then the other is something that's relatively new for us, which is we've been kind of leaning into something, it's a little bit of a technical term, trust-based philanthropy, which is really trying to interrupt the kind of framework that grant making has had in the past traditionally, where it's sort of, we're going to give you money and we're going to hold you accountable to meeting a certain number of really specific metrics. We want very, very specific things proved to us before we're going to call this grant a success, and kind of flips that over and says, well, what if we just pick organizations that we trust, and we trust them because we trust the leadership and we trust their financial stability, or where they're at and their authenticity and their honesty in working with us, or they're at a stage where they need some unrestricted support, and then that will help them see if they can get to the next level. And we have that as a really honest conversation. And that that new framework, not new, but new to us, I guess, is one that allows us to broaden our frame instead of continuing only to ask the donors who work with us and us ourselves to fund organizations that are already established, many of which are not led by BIPOC people or aren't always in themselves meeting some of the needs because that are current because they've had a longer history. We can also address some emerging needs, either with longstanding organizations or newer organizations, smaller organizations, startup organizations that are really trying to kind of address some of those key issues that we saw in the data at the start of this. And we really strongly believe in this trust-based framework, or I do, and I would say my diverse employees and our diverse board have been amenable to having a conversation around this. And we held an event this fall around trust-based philanthropy, including representatives from several nonprofits. It can be nerve-wracking because it's different. And I think for us, we probably wouldn't have been able to lean into this to the extent we have, and hopefully more in the future, if we didn't have this diversity in our leadership, and by which I mean our boards. This is a little different from some other organizations and among our employees.
Yeah.
One comment.
No, please go ahead, Lisa.
Make one comment. So we commented on wanting to bring in a diverse workforce. I think it's important that you also create structures within your organization to support that diversity once you recruit it, because the retention aspect of that's the inclusion piece. So whether that's employee resource groups, depending on the size of your organization, ways for diverse populations, whether that's like at Cox, we have employee resource groups, we've got GLBT, we've got Asian Pacific, we've got Latino, we've got Black, we've got a female one. So women can get together with other women in the company and learn and mentor and grow with each other, so that you're bringing all those traditions forward. We've got a Native American ERG that we're standing up here shortly. So we've got a veterans one. So employees that have these like experiences and like histories and cultures want to be able to come together authentically to talk about their experiences with each other. And then, of course, there are members outside of those cultural groups or ethnic groups that also join those resource groups. So I think it's, once you get them there, you got to keep them there, right? And you got to work to not indoctrinate them into the broader overall salad bowl of your culture, but you've got to get systems in place to do that. Because just expecting that you can take someone from a diverse background and plop them into a room where there aren't people that look and sound like them necessarily, and that they're going to thrive or be comfortable, you got to really help make that happen in your company.
Yeah, I really agree with what you say, Lisa. We're a small organization here at EBRC. The university is a much larger, large organization, but within our center, we're pretty small. And I can think of an example where we brought in recently a younger girl, much younger than many of us within the center. And I think, it happened right before COVID. And I think she struggled to connect. She was not from the Tucson region. She came here and she struggled to connect, one, because it was COVID and it was really hard to meet other individuals around the community, but then also, struggled to connect with us because we were just a different demographic than her. And so, she was a wonderful person, and she moved back to her family. But that is, something that is important, is having those organizations and those supports in place. But I do want to follow up with something that Jenny said, and is that it is a really tight labor market. And I'm curious how each of you, through this tight labor market and just in general, recruit for diversity within each of your own organizations. And Felipe, if you'd like to start.
Absolutely. To me, the first part, it's talent. They need to have a skill set. So I don't go and say, I'm going to hire today a Asian American because I need someone in this organization. I look for talent, and then when I'm starting recruiting and starting interviewing, if I find a person that it's diverse, that to me it's applause. But then I have to have a conversation with that individual to see if they're really diverse, because I think sometimes we make the mistake of confusing diversity on skin color or names. I don't know if you follow the World Cup, but if hopefully you do, and Cox Communication, by the way, has great coverage of the World Cup. But there's a player playing for Switzerland, and his name is very Swiss, Rubén Vargas Martínez. Dominican dad, mom from Switzerland. He was born in Switzerland, raised in Switzerland. I think he speaks almost none or very little Spanish. So if I was there to hire him for my company because, oh, he's an Hispanic and he might not be. I mean, I know, to be honest, non-Hispanics in our community that are more diverse than Hispanics, some Hispanics are friends that I have. I have individuals. So again, I think that diversity, and when you're recruiting, you first look for talent, and second, you look at the diversity in many ways, but one has to be, do they have the experience where they were in a family that multiculturalism was part of it, or do they just have a last name that seems to be for about this specific group? So sorry that I'm rambling all around, but what I look first is, again, talent, and we have great talent that is diverse in our community. And second, if that talent ends up being diverse, oh, that's beautiful. And again, because it can help me, the organization, and our community understand other areas, again, have those dialogues. And to me, many times it's listening to them. It's paying attention to, I try to have not a very hierarchical system of operation. I like to walk and talk to staff and have conversations, and my door is always open to have collaborations, and many times it's dialogue where they're teaching me things that I have no idea because I haven't been exposed or educated. So look for talent, and again, have a conversation and look at the diversity that's going to help the organization be better.
Great. Thank you, Felipe. Jenny, would you like to talk about how you guys recruit for diversity?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a small organization. We have 24 employees, so bear that in mind. I already mentioned, we recently did a compensation study. So I think, paying people fairly is probably a good first step. We have a real growth focus on our team. So we have professional development and growth as being a part of the team goal that we have. And so one of the first things that I think is really important is to look within and develop the people that you have. In a small organization in particular, we may not have long kind of career paths, but if you grow people to move into different roles, you're able to kind of create a vision for people to have a longer term career. And I think that's appealing to a wide diversity of employees. We also have experimented with targeting our advertising during hiring to different sources of mixed results. I'm going to say we kind of keep trying different things and looking for something that has the best effect. We have gone through a big process of sort of reviewing all our policies, making sure everything is consistent with our idea, focus, and values, so that our marketing, our branding, we're so far for we'll never be done. I would say we're still in the first 10% of our run, but it's we're kind of tackling it bit by bit. And so we just want to make sure that once people do get here, we're revisiting our onboarding process, made it a lot more welcoming, a lot more inclusive. We have a real culture of celebration and appreciation. The first staff meeting I attended here, I found it really amazing because the first 10 minutes was everybody applauding each other for things that they had done for each other. And it was just like such a wonderful experience. And I think it's very welcoming to people. Kind of more tactically diversifying networks. So, there's a beautiful confluence between my job, which is, really, I kind of look at this and say, all of Southern Arizona is my boss. So I go out and meet people all the time. And so I kind of look at my network with people I'm meeting with, the people I'm connected to on LinkedIn, the people I'm talking to, the places I'm going to visit, the communities I'm going to visit, and say, hey, am I missing anyone? Am I kind of, so I actually take that step. With some guidance from our board chair, Steen Hill, who was at Raytheon. We've got an active recruitment pipeline. So when we see people who have talent, I'm, maybe again, pushing the curtain, but we say, hey, maybe this might be a great person to work with us in the future. And we note that down. We try and keep in touch. We've done a few other things during screening and hiring. We've changed all of our job postings to be transparent about salaries. So compensation is included on all. We've removed extraneous requirements. So degrees or other things that we don't think are really critical for the role, but maybe just, we've done by rote. We've removed those. We've included in those job postings that you may have qualifications that we haven't thought of. So just tell us about them. So we're trying to be pretty welcoming in that. So we've done quite a bit, I think, in our kind of HR hiring and recruitment process in the last year and a half.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Lisa, would you like to share with us how you guys recruit for diversity?
Yeah, so I would say, we're large, we have about 55,000 employees nationwide. And so we have a multi-pronged approach to getting into certain population bases. But I would say that probably the significant shift is we have a company that does recruiting nationally. Of course, we do some of the things that Jenny and Felipe have talked about in terms of our local contacts and relationships, in terms of identifying talent. But again, we assessed where we were not doing well, whether it was women, African Americans, young people, millennials, where are we really lacking a representation? And then as far as our recruiting firm and leadership that hires is to ensure that the candidate pools are diverse enough to create diversity. If you on Thanksgiving, if you sat around and said, okay, you look at your Thanksgiving table and see how much diversity is in your life, it's probably not as diverse as you would like it to be, because you're around the same people all the time. And so, if it's just up to Lisa Lavallo to go recruit people are going to tend to look like me probably. And so, you have to be really thoughtful about what do we need and where do we go find talent that is diverse, and then evaluate that. We have specific objectives for every hiring pool that needs to have a diverse composition. And if we cannot get that hiring pool, it's not because there's not talented Black people or not talented Latino people. It's because we have worked hard enough to break into those communities to meet those talented people. So, it's when I say that we want to have a diverse panel, that doesn't mean all the white people are really smart and the rest of them are okay. It means they're all high-performing, talented people, and we are going to go find the most high-performing, talented people in all diverse categories. And until we crack that nut, we're going to keep looking. So, I think that's a different mindset. And it was interesting when we were going through the George Floyd Summer of Dialogues to listen to the white male responses to us talking about where we need to improve around leadership in the African American community in our company. And even some saying, does that mean my career is over? Right? Because you're going to hire a diverse candidate over me. And that mentality is what has to change. Right? The notion that a white person is no longer going to excel because you're going to pick an inferior minority, that's not the case. Now it's just everybody competing equally in a structure that allows everyone a seat at the table. And that's hard for people to take. To Felipe's point in the beginning about saying something that would make someone feel uncomfortable. And so we're just building it into our goals. But by no means when you have diverse candidate pools, or you say to the head hunter or recruiter, this pool is not adequate, go back and find more talent. That's not saying go find me less qualified people because I want to have a Mexican and a Black and a woman and that's not what we're saying. We're saying you're not doing your job by getting out there and finding the best talent that we have in the most diverse way possible. So, that I think is the sea change mentally that people have to make. It's not a quota system. It's go find the talent and meet them where they are, not expect them just to show up on your doorstep when you haven't been diverse in the past. Right? Women used to kill each other off in the corporate boardroom because we thought there was only going to be one. So the worst boss you could have was a woman if you're a woman, because she's never going to let you excel because there's only one woman in the boardroom. That's changed. So, there's hope.
Yeah, and Lisa, to your comment about quotas, once I stepped out from a searching company because I read into some messages that I was brought in for the final interview process because they needed an Hispanic in the pool. And I said, something, I'm out. If you're looking for my talent, all in. If you're running me just for a quota, sorry, not interested in working for that organization. So yeah, I hope that we change the mentality of quotas. And there's great talent out there. A suggestion, again, you're watching this webinar, if you have, again, a diverse staff members, and we're also, like Jenny, very small organization, ask some of your diverse employees that you trust, like, hey, do you know anyone in your circle, in your, at least I mentioned, in your Thanksgiving table, with these skill sets that we're looking for? I mean, that's a very good way to get a filter of approval, maybe, by just your existing workforce in your organization.
I mean, Felipe, if I were to see you at an event and I'm like, gosh, we really would like to hire more Latino talent, you're not going to give me a recommendation of someone who's Latino and doesn't have talent. I mean, that's the thing. Those two are not, those things are not separate, talent and they're one and the same. And so, it's just like, I'm talking to you about talent that has this background and this point of view. Who do you know? You're not going to send me someone just because they're Hispanic.
Lisa, would you, so I just wanted to mention, thank you, sorry, your camera went off for a moment. I just wanted to mention that we're going to open up to questions to the audience here in just a minute. So if you have any questions, you can please put them in the question and answer box at the end, at the bottom of your screen. I would just like to kind of wrap up with one question to each of you, kind of, as you're all leaders within our community, and you're all, DEI is obviously very important to all three of you. So I just, if you want to speak briefly, a few minutes here to kind of say, wrap up comments and say anything that you've done to support DEI. You've all talked about your organizations, but within our community, and then any final comments that each of you have to say. And Jenny, if you'd like to start.
Sure. So couple tactics that we've been involved in the last few years. One was during COVID, and the Community Foundation was tapped to provide COVID relief support coming from multiple sources, philanthropists, city, county, to really try and make sure the nonprofit community could weather what was a dramatic, in some cases, complete loss of revenue. So to make sure that our nonprofit community would survive. There was sort of a weekly meeting of how do we meet the needs in the community right now, right this minute. Critical needs, important needs right now. So there was a really heroic group of volunteers and employees and board members here who did that for 18 months every week, and gave out nearly $4 million to the community to kind of keep a lot of those organizations going. And we did an analysis of that, and 94% of that funding went to organizations that serve marginalized communities. So we're really proud of that. We have joined also with the Vitalist Health Foundation and the Level Foundation to give out idea grants. So to help nonprofit organizations to do their own DEI work. So we've been really pleased to offer a couple rounds of those idea grants. And then a couple things that one is recent and one is upcoming. So we recently, philanthropy is this weird beast because it's sort of, you have to, who's a philanthropist and who, there's so much history. We'll do another webinar on that someday, but I have a really strong desire to have everyone feel comfortable in the role of giving, whatever that means to you. And so we've created impact funds, which are collective giving vehicles, so that people, you can be 16 and give $6, you can be 60 and give $60,000, and it comes together around key issues in our community, such as housing, education, animal welfare, environmental sustainability. But we have a fund that is an idea fund. So we're really looking forward to being able to activate that fund. It's brand new, so that it's just beginning. And then something upcoming I just want to make sure that everyone on the webinar is aware of is the Center for Healthy Nonprofits, which is a program of the Community Foundation, supports Beyond the Check. So we provide education, capacity building for the nonprofit community. We're holding a conference January 8th in the afternoon called Imagining Nonprofit Boards. And for anyone who's a board member, aspiring board member, nonprofit leader, working with nonprofit boards, I think it would be a great opportunity. We have 4 national speakers, including a speaker who will address DEI and boards and how we reimagine boards for people who are, that demographic you showed of the age population versus ethnicity and race. You see older white audiences are, in that aging out, I'm in that demographic, right? I plan to be here for a while, but younger populations are very diverse. And so the board experience was kind of built for a certain type of population. Then we're going to kind of lose that leadership if we don't reimagine it. So I welcome everyone to come to our website, cfsaz.org, and check that out. We do have scholarships available. Okay, that's my commercial. I'm done.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Thanks so much for joining us today. Lisa, I just want to say I really love the assessment that you guys have done within your organization and your comments about that hiring and recruiting is not just about meeting quotas. It's really, I think that's a really important point about just having inclusive environments within communities that we're not just hiring you because you're a Latino, we're hiring you because you are the most qualified candidate for this position. And so is there anything that any wrap-up comments that you would like to say?
I would just say one thing to everyone who's leading people or aspires to do so. If you don't show up to your workplace at being your authentic self, it's really, really difficult for people to feel safe to be themselves. And that's really at the critical one-on-one, person-to-person element of DE&I. Is it in your heart? And are you able to express that in a way that is loving and thoughtful and is you? Are you a complete person at work? Because that's where I think some of the cynicism sets in. Like that's when you say you care, but you never show in any way how you communicate or the questions you ask that you're really committed to that change and that movement long term and in perpetuity. So, this notion of bringing your authentic self to work is about inclusion. And that as a leader, you need to do a very, in-depth self-assessment of your own skills and capability and your own fears and the things that you won't talk about or won't bring to the workplace. That has an effect on how people feel about their exchange with you and their perception of their security within it.
Thank you, Lisa. And Felipe, we'll wrap up this question answer session with you, and then we'll move to the audience questions. Oh, Felipe, you might be muted.
I am. I have two mute buttons. They don't trust me here in the office. So, again, Jenny and Lisa, I'm thankful you're here today. I'm learning a lot from you. I understand that we have to be open and have dialogues and conversations and this ongoing process. And help give something that we've been trying to do at Visit Tucson. It's help amplify the voice of our diverse community. And how we try to do that, it's we've been blessed to have an organization that has a great team, and we've been able to access the ears and eyes of journalists and media from all over the world, literally. And when they come to our community, we make sure that they're meeting and having conversations with our diverse community, because that's who we are. So to me, it feels amazing that I can be in literally, 3 weeks ago with a food TV star that was here in Tucson, and we are with our native tribe in one of the farms, and they're talking to a farmer that is a tribal member, and she's talking about the culture and talking about the Tohono O'odham Nation. And to me, that's like so rewarding, because we were able to make a connection between someone that has a big audience on television and social media, being a star, and a local farmer that it's a woman, Tohono O'odham, that would never have maybe that opportunity to have someone share the story. So for us at Visit Tucson, we're very excited, very happy, very proud every time that we can bring a journalist from literally all over the world and have the opportunity to amplify the voice of our diverse community. And to me, at the end of the day, that's beautiful. Sitting on the back and just looking at those conversations, and then either the TV show or the newspaper article or whatever might be, that is great for me. Let's be proud about Tucson. Let's be proud again how diverse. Through my job, I've been able to travel to many parts in the world, and believe me, you go to many places and gosh, everyone looks the same, everything looks the same. We are so different, and that's a big strength. And people in the world admire the US and they admire our community because of our diversity. So it's an asset. So let's make sure that you use it and your company, organization as an asset, and be proud again of who we are and what we have to offer.
Thank you, Felipe, and thank all three of you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it over to George now, who will kind of moderate the questions from the audience. And I just want to say US Iran are playing right now, so go US. Hopefully we make it out of group play, but if you're a soccer fan, I certainly am. All right. Thanks, George.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. And thank you, Jenny, Lisa, and Felipe. That's a really, really great discussion. So we do have a couple of questions from the audience. There are actually two questions on essentially the same topic. And this question is, how do you see your organization's role in aligning DEI with economic and workforce development growth? So how are you thinking about how DEI kind of interacts with these broader initiatives to develop our workforce and develop our economy? And that's open for anybody who's willing to jump in and tackle that one.
Well, I'll start with, we work through we work through philanthropists, donors, community members, and organizations that meet community needs. So we tend to look at this and try to bring really good information and options to donors. So for example, a group might be interested in, we have a fund that's very interested in youth and economic development, yet they're a little constrained in their geography. They're up in kind of the Oro Valley area, and they don't know a lot just out of proximity to other parts of Southern Arizona. So they have some funding, and we tend to help bring some opportunities to them in terms of organizations that are doing really good work in diverse populations. And so that's one way we do it, just by ingrained knowledge of the community and where some of the work is being done, and bring those opportunities to donors who may be interested in funding that work. So from a nonprofit standpoint, that's one angle.
Thanks, Jenny. Lisa or Felipe?
I would say, I guess my reaction to that is that, we have Pima Community College and the University of Arizona, and these are really the conduits for us figuring out the talent and the workforce of the future, and the ability to identify. At PCC, for example, they have put up these kind of centers of excellence around certain emerging areas like electronic vehicles, for example, and being able to care for, maintain, build, sell, nurture that sector in our community. Aerospace, and looking at the logistics industry and some things that are occurring in that space. And so our university and our community college system, working with our K through 12 system to bring up our local workforce into these skill sets of the future, I think is really important. And I think we've got a good portfolio and some assets that we're putting together really well to enable that. And that's not only going to enable companies like Cox to have a talent pool, but for these emerging businesses that we're constantly working to recruit and retain here. That's a critical element to workforce development here in Southern Arizona, and the state for that matter.
And for us, it's a lot of collaboration with our community college, with our university, especially hospitality programs. We try to go and be involved when they're doing workshops. We always have conversations and trying to motivate and excite people about, of course, our industry, hospitality industry, but in general, a diverse pool. And I think that also in the area of attraction of companies, as we're seeing more companies asking for sustainability practices for where they're going to be locating, diversity is becoming very important as well. And they're looking for diverse pools because, as Lisa mentioned, the world is getting smaller. I mean, you're interacting with people from all over the world, and you need a diversity that's going to help your company being able to help you connect even better with that diverse world that we are in.
Great, thank you, Felipe.
George, can I just add one thing, which I can't believe I didn't say before?
Please.
So the African American Legacy Fund is an amazing program that works through CFSA, and it has a huge impact in supporting Black-owned businesses. And in fact, there was just a Black-owned business market over the weekend, and also supports African American Leadership Institute, which is being funded through this. And so when you said workforce development, I think I was thinking of high schoolers, but we have to develop people at all levels of their career and support entrepreneurism and small businesses too. So in diversifying our economy, I think all sectors are important.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Okay, I think this second question is actually a perfect one to end on. So they would like for each of the panelists to talk about what their organization's best DEI initiatives have been since the murder of George Floyd. Lisa, would you like to start?
Well, I would say what evolved out of that experience was what we're calling 34 by 34, which is for us to affect or to have a positive impact on 34 million Americans by 2034. And we're doing that by focusing on social justice pillars in our local community. And so we have created a very large movement within our company the last year after we went through these learning, the dialoguing, the internal assessments, the local review to say, okay, we can do this. Our network passes 34 million people a day. Are we going to be more than a cable company? Are we going to try to really have a deeper connection to the people that we serve and work with and live around? And so we've gotten really, really metric driven around how we're going to make impact. So I think it's evolving, but what we measure, we're going to do. So I'm encouraged by that.
Great. Jenny or Felipe?
Jenny, go ahead. Go ahead, Jenny.
I'm struggling with best.
Oh.
That's inherent in the question, and I don't know that I can name something that is best. I think I've discussed a lot of the activity and efforts and tactics and strategies we've tried, but I think if I kind of go back to like what happened, it cracked us open. It just cracked us open, right? So who we were before and who we were after is completely different, and the level of dialogue, the openness to the vulnerability is completely changed in the way that at least I personally look at philanthropy has changed completely. And how that inherent power structures within, who has money, who gets money, how that transaction occurs and what kind of package. Is it a package of trust, or is it a package labeled something else, that's more structurally challenging. So we're trying a lot of things. I don't know that I can say there's enough time has passed for me to assess what's worked best. But I think in terms of what happened is between COVID and the murder of George Floyd and everything, all the community agitation, everything our community has faced, we're just different and approach everything differently. And I think that's been painful, important, revolutionary, and good.
And I agree with both Jenny and Lisa that to us, it hasn't been anything transformational that we saw like, oh gosh, so clear cut before and after. But for sure, it's something that it's now, maybe it was on the sideline of our view, and now it's front and central, the issue of diversity. Internally, I think a change that we made, I don't know if it's a best practice, but something that hopefully is making us a little better. We used to have, or we still have, a department in VC Tucson that works only with the Mexico market. It's called Vamos a Tucson, and it was only about how we connect with Mexico, and it's a very important market for us. But we changed it a little bit, their approach, and now it's not only working with the Mexico marketing, but it's multicultural. It's working with every department and organization to ensure that when we are marketing, communicating, having conversations, that we have that diversity of culture that we represent in our sales efforts, in our marketing efforts. So it was a small change internally, an organization, making sure that we are more intentional on our efforts on diversity. And I think that has helped us. And again, we're not done yet. I don't think that we can be used as an example of, gosh, VC Tucson is this amazing transformational organization. But definitely, I think that every step, one more step is going to get you closer to where you're going to be. So just start today. And I think that's my recommendation. Get one or two ideas, do it, make it happen, and you'll feel more comfortable. Jenny, what's the term you use? More psychological framework, or how do you mention that you feel safe?
Psychological safety, yeah.
Thank you very much. That one, and build that environment. As Lisa mentioned, bring that passion to your organization. Make sure that you are being there and show there and have those conversations. And believe me, you'll provide a more fun workspace as well.
Well, that's a fantastic closing, Felipe. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much to Jenny, Lisa, and Felipe for joining us today. Thank you for Jennifer for the terrific research that you've done in putting the numbers together. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate you tuning in to our Map Talk webinar. We'll be back with more of these in the future, and we hope to see you again soon. So happy holidays, everyone. Thank you so much again, and we will see you soon.
Thank you. Take care.